Let's talk about Bridget McKenzie and the fact that she's gone, but let's also talk about the wider issue here, which is the media told you that Scott Morrison had the worst possible summer because, firstly, you know, God forbid he went on holidays with his kids. I know it's terrible. And then remember, he didn't do enough about climate change, which is what the Ghost didn't do either, and what the Greens or Labor didn't win an election doing. So that's what they told you all summer, and now they just repeat it as fact. Here's how they wrapped up. Not a great day for the government.
Bridget McKenzie's demise caps off an awful, sometimes humiliating summer for Scott Morrison. Parliament resumes on Tuesday with his colleagues less sure about the Prime Minister's judgment.
Any chance this is the end of the scandal now?
Well, Scott Morrison will hope so, Mark, but I seriously doubt it.
It's bad to lose a minister, Pete, and this is just the latest misfortune in a litany of summer misery for Scott Morrison. Parliament's returning this week, and this messy saga is just one of the many shots the opposition has to fire at a government that can't seem to take a trick. The PM will argue the report found no pork barrelling, but given he commissioned it, that might seem all a bit too neat. And then there'll be the fallout in the National Party room, which will be ugly, as some are gunning for the leader. So Scott Morrison's miserable summer is far from over, Pete.
Oh, do you like the sound effects at 6 p.m? Bang, 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 bang. It's like listening to 90s Triple M. I also love that, you see the last one he mentioned about shooting all the time because it was Bridget McKenzie and she's a member of a gun club. Oh, they're so clever. Liz, look, Bridget McKenzie gone, no question about that she had to. Certainly, I think once the colour-coded stuff came out, there was no question. People have actually paid attention. I hardly fought that hard to keep her. But what's your sense about the people in that building and how they want to try to Tony Abbott, Scott Morrison?
Sorry, what was that?
What's your sense of the media that is waiting for Morrison this year?
Oh, look, the guy's not going to be able to keep him happy, know what he does. And we've seen that over this summer. Absolutely everything he does, everything he doesn't do, these guys are jumping down his throat. This is just one of many drums that they've been beating for a long time now, and unfortunately, even though now she is off the front bench, we know it's not the last we're going to hear of it. So they've exposed their modus operandi this year, and we know what to expect even before the first sitting week. It's going to be a long 2020 for the coalition government. This is how the media's playing.
Daniel, I'm not deflecting. It was a terrible way that this all was a death by 1,000 cuts. Sometimes the stories were really good, really direct, really front on. Sometimes they were just sort of about trying to keep it up in the air. But I mean, we all know the reason this didn't happen sooner was because she's the deputy leader of the coalition party that is in government with, and as powerful as a Prime Minister is, ironically, you become relatively powerless when you're trying to move a gnat that doesn't want to go anywhere.
Well, that's right, Paul, and I think you hit the nail on the head in your editorial. This is really the unelected Canberra swamp triumphing over the will of the Australian people. In a Westminster parliamentary democracy that our great country has, is the bureaucrats who advise and the ministers who decide. And that's exactly what Senator McKenzie did here. Now, there's actually three groups of unelected bureaucrats involved here. There's the Australian National Audit Office, who, and we're going to talk about Mark Dreyfus later, he's also involved in this. He asked the ANAO to commence this audit on the back of the $127,000 donation that went to the Yankalita Bowls Club in the 2018 by-election in Mayo by Georgina Downer. So they voluntarily metastasised that audit into the entire sports grants program. Then we had an investigation by another unelected bureaucrat, the Secretary of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and in part on the back of that investigation, the government has backed another group of unelected bureaucrats at Sports Australia over an elected member of Parliament. I think many Australians are sitting at home thinking, what is the point in going to the ballot box when you've got a permanent political class in Canberra that apparently is calling the shots and, in coordination with the mainstream media and the ABC, has managed to get rid of, at least for the time being from her position, a very competent Conservative politician from Victoria?
Well, and the sneer that went through all of this, and I mentioned about the gun club stuff, was, I mean, this is just tailor-made for how to, and I deliberately use this word, trigger these people, which is that at one point in time, one of the salacious stories about Bridget McKenzie was that she'd given a grand total of $1 million to shooting clubs. Well, I hate to break it to them, it is an Olympic sport. It wasn't just because she's a crazy gun nut from the country, but Daniel, all of that doesn't matter because it's all a drip feed. They got what they wanted, and that's fine. But the where to from here, I think there's a really important thing to mention about what you just said there, about which is the discretion of ministers. Today, some of the questioning of the Prime Minister is, should we continue with this scheme where ministers are able to overrule bureaucrats? Yes, bloody oath we should have that. Otherwise, as I say, computer says no will be the way that the country runs.
Well, that's right, Paul. And just to add to that, one of the so-called scandals of this, aside from the Guns Club, was that Senator McKenzie had apparently overridden the bureaucrats on a decision. So she gave $500,000 to the Pakenham Footy Club, which is in the southeast suburbs of Victoria, whereas the bureaucrats wanted that $500,000 to go to the Gippsland Lakes roller derby. Now, nobody in Victoria cares about the roller derby. They care about footy clubs. Now, which one is more in touch with community standards and expectations? The elected member of Parliament giving the money to a footy club, which, by the way, was to build a female changing room, which the ABC normally would be all over? Or is it the unelected bureaucrats giving money to the identity box-ticking roller derby in East Gippsland? Give me a break.
Because that's the thing, isn't it, Liz, where if it was down to the bureaucrat to exclusively decide where every dollar of taxpayer money goes, it wouldn't be about the worthiness of the project. It would be about how diverse the application was, and was it submitted to us on recycled paper? Was there a rainbow logo somewhere in there?
Yep, that would be mandatory, I'm sure. Look, this is the way they play. Sadly, this is the way that they play, and we've seen it time and time again.
And we push back, and what's the punishment for us? They want us off the air. I think that might mean we're mildly effective, Liz. We're not allowed to push back in this new world, are we? But we ain't going anywhere.